welcome back to Gracie Meets. I talk about a lot of unique jobs on this podcast, but this job I'm going to talk about today is a job I didn't even know existed. I've invited Miss Brooke Cooley onto the show to talk about the not-so-known career of being a farrier. Whenever you think of a farrier, you might think of the underworld and the boat that takes you to the underworld. But this isn't what that job is. Trust me, I made that mistake at first. Well, why don't we learn more, and why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
My name's Brooke Cooley. I'm 20 years old. I live outside of Houston, Texas. Have been most of my life. I'm a horse girl, and I love spending all my time outside and working hard and enjoying life. So
how would you explain your job to a teenager?
I'm a horse shoer. The proper name is Farrier. Horses' hooves grow regularly like a rodent's teeth or your nails or my nails. So my job as a farrier is to come in every other month and trim away the extra hoof growth. So my job is not just putting shoes on horses' feet. It's mostly maintaining the excess hoof growth. And I also shoe horses for correctional reasons. Horses do end up with health issues regarding their feet, and that's the majority of the shoeing work that I do.
So why did you pick this as your career?
Well, as a teenager, I ended up becoming obsessed with horses. I started taking riding lessons, and after I got my first horse, I decided that I wanted to work with horses, or at least animals, for the rest of my life. And I looked into several different careers, and most young aspiring equestrians fall towards training or vet work. I looked into those. The training industry is very competitive because it's hard to find a good trainer, be a good trainer, and actually get work. Most people can train their own horses for the most part. So why do they need a trainer? And then the vet industry is obviously very competitive. One of my old friends is 50, probably getting close to 55 or 60 at this point. And as far as I know, she still hasn't paid off her vet school. So obviously the payback for that isn't great. And I was at horse camp one summer working as a counselor, and the farrier was there working all the horses in the barn, and I got interested, and next thing I know, that fall I was going to farrier school, and I've just been tooting along ever since.
So you mentioned a farrier school. So what was that like?
The farrier school is basically a trade school. However, to be a farrier, you don't actually have to go to trade school, and as far as Texas goes, you don't actually have to have a permit or a license to be a farrier. There's no legal obligation for that, which makes it very easy for, any criminal or, drunkard that decides they want to make extra side money to say they're a farrier, which also actually helps me out because most of my clients that I get have trouble finding good farriers. But that's also where the shoeing school comes in, because if you go to that school and you get like the certification of completion, you have foundation and you learn how to do it before you get out there and start doing it yourself. But most farriers get their experience from interning with other farriers. School isn't always the best option. And actually, I'll tell you what, the school I went to was called Oklahoma Horseshoeing School, and it's been known as the best horseshoeing school in the country to go to. In fact, people all the way from Canada would fly down to that school. Like I'd say probably about a third of the people I was there with were Canadians, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. However, I think that my experience at the horseshoeing school was as simple as I learned how to slap a shoe on a horse's foot. I did not learn very much about the science behind it, and I had to learn that more on my own from learning from other farriers and from my own personal experience. So,
well, shout out to them. Good job being the best.
Thank you.
So how early could someone start this job, and when would be the best time to decide to do this job?
Well, you want to do it when you're younger. It's very uncommon to find farriers that are past the age of 40 actually being able to physically handle doing the job, at least full time. So I went to school when I was 17, and I feel like that was a good time for me. It was everyone grows up at a different pace. I grew up pretty fast, and by the time I was 16 years old, I was tired of doing school, and I wanted to start working. I got a job as a cashier at a grocery store, and I did that for about a year before I went to horseshoeing school. and then did both of those part-time for the next several months until I dropped the cashier completely and went Farrier full-time. The reason why I think that was a good time for me to start was partially because I was in a stage of my life where I just wanted to get out there and start making my own money. And for somebody else, that may be later, that may be sooner. I don't think there's any like laws having to do with how early you can start, but you need to be physically well off enough and probably mature enough to be able to actually do it. You know, I am my own business owner. I do have to run my own business. So you have to be old enough and mature enough to be able to handle those kind of responsibilities. I think the youngest person I heard about being at the Farrier school was 16. And so I'd say that's probably the earliest you could really get into it, in my opinion.
So this is one of those you can start early jobs.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there certain areas of the country that would be a better location to be a farrier, or can you just do it kind of anywhere?
Anywhere where there's horses, you can be a farrier. But so I live outside of probably one of the most horse-thick areas. I mean, we have the Houston Rodeo here every year, so you can imagine how much horse traffic and just horses in general live around here. I mean, my parents' neighborhood, they're not equestrians, and right down the road is a full-service horse barn, and the next neighborhood over is a equestrian neighborhood where they have barns and stalls for horses in their backyards. So, I mean, you can drive just about anywhere here and see a pasture of at least cows or horses around every corner. So, you know, if you live in New York, probably being a farrier isn't really a good option for you.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yep.
Working with horses seems kind of dangerous, if you know what I mean. So are there any like dangers in your career?
Absolutely. So one thing that some people don't realize when looking at this kind of job is I actually didn't realize this when I first started. The farrier work is like one of the least important parts of my job, like actually being a good farrier. Being able to handle difficult horses is very important for my job. And so I actually am very fortunate that I spent most of my teenage years learning about horses and learning horse etiquette, which is, you know, learning the horse sense, that kind of, you know, you know when you know kind of thing. You can't read a book and learn this kind of thing. You can read their body language, and that has kept me from getting hurt so many times. I can tell when a horse is about to kick, or when a horse is about to bite, or when a horse is about to step on me, or when it's about to take off. You know, the horse gets tense, or they start fidgeting or flinching, and when they get like that, that's when it gets dangerous for me. I have been kicked in the head once. That was by mistake, though. I had a donkey kick straight out at me into the gut. However, this donkey was very sweet, and I think it was actually going for the donkey that was standing behind it, and he actually recoiled as he kicked out at me. So I didn't actually get the full impact of the kick, thankfully. But last week, I actually, this is unrelated to farrier work, but I fell off my horse about a week or two ago, and I've actually been dealing with back pain and stiffness the past couple weeks, and I ended up waking up this morning barely able to walk. So it's not only like the horses could hurt you, but also you could, you know, hurt yourself by overdoing it. And so I've had to kind of pull back a little bit with how much I've been working and trying to take care of myself better. And then on top of all that, if you don't just do feet trimming, do like barefoot hoof trimming, if you do shoes, it's easy to get a nail stuck in your leg. Because what happens is you put the shoe on the bottom and then you drive nails through the bottom of the shoe, and they go through part of the hoof, and the tip of the nail comes out the side of the hoof. So it's not just going all the way up into the foot, because that's going to hurt them. And often, many times, the horses will yank their leg when you're not paying attention. And they do make chaps, which is like a split apron made of leather that you wear to protect yourself. But every time I've gotten a nail in my leg, I was wearing chaps. So I've had to use alternative measures to keep nails out of my leg. And generally, the reason why that happens is because farriers hold the hoof between like their knees or the legs or whatever to keep it still while they work. And so they can also use both their hands with the tools. But because, you know, you don't have control with your hands, they could just pull up and, like I said, put a nail in your leg really easy.
Well, I did not know about that part. This job I didn't even really know about. So
it's been around forever, and it actually is still a thing because of the fact that horses' feet keep growing, and they never stop growing. And domestic horses actually have tons of hoof problems because we can't create a healthy environment for their feet to thrive. Like, a lot of people are like, well, Mustangs don't have farriers because they're wild horses. Why do these horses need farriers? Well, bad breeding. I don't know if you ever heard of thoroughbred horses, but they are like the horses they use for racing, like the Kentucky Derby and all that. They are bred to be one of the most athletic horses around, but a downside of their breeding is that they were actually bred with the worst feet ever. So all of them usually have to have therapeutic shoes on all the time. Otherwise, they go lame, which means that their leg or foot is hurt and that they can't walk. So that's part of my job.
Well, this question wasn't on my list, but it just came into mind. Like, what is your opinions on, like, horse races and stuff like that?
I love racing horses. I will go out to fields and, like, run with my friends on our horses. It's so thrilling. But the problem with horse racing is the money that is involved. Whenever you involve money into a sport that involves animals, the animals' welfare goes out the window, and half the time you end up with people mistreating the horses, and horses end up in kill pens before they're ready. So horses are not generally physically mature enough to handle a saddle and a rider until they're about 4. You can start them as early as 2, but if you overwork them, they're likely to, because they're still growing and their body is not fully developed, they are likely to get injured way easier and to have development issues. And people that race horses and breed race horses will tend to start them and put them on a racetrack as early as 2 years old, basically running them to death. And when they're not making numbers anymore, they sell them at an auction. And actually, most of the like jumping horses that jump over like the obstacles and stuff, a lot of them are ex-race horses that were rescued and rehabilitated. So racing itself is not a problem, but the way that people treat race horses is a problem.
So what do you think makes being a farrier not a normal job?
Well, it is not a 9-to-5 kind of job. The fact that I'm self-employed definitely makes it more unique. And also, unlike most businesses, unless I get into a kind of like I manage contractors kind of job, it is 100% me. I don't have to hire anyone else. I don't have to deal with anyone else other than my individual clients. My job is very much like a contractor's work. I get called by a client. I give them a quote. We set up an appointment. I drive to their farm. I work on their horses. They pay me, and I go home. And I'll do like several of those in a day. And it's really great because I can be super flexible with my schedule, and I can pick and choose which animals I work on. I don't have a boss that tells me you have to do this horse, or if you keep telling me you can't do this horse, you can't do that horse, I'm going to cut your pay or fire you or whatever. That's all up to me. I don't have to put up with stuff I don't want to put up with. Of course, if I keep turning down tons of work, my paycheck hurts because there's no job security here because, if I show up and do the work, I get paid. If I don't get paid. So That's it.
Well, thank you for letting me interview you. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
I like the fact that when it comes to jobs to consider after we graduate, sometimes we find our calling in the most obscure places. It's neat to think that some of the career options out there for us are such old professions. It's interesting to think you could share a profession with someone from hundreds or even thousands of years ago. No normal person could help carry on a tradition that goes back that many years. But then again, show me a normal teenager. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you like Gracie Meets, subscribe so you can listen every time a new episode is dropped. And follow Gracie Meets on Instagram at gracie.meets. Tune in next Saturday for a special Veterans Day episode.